officially 7 o'clock on the East Coast, 4 o'clock on the West Coast, 6 o'clock in Texas, and 5 o'clock in Denver. That means it's time to get started. Welcome everybody to our first mentor workshop. So essentially our first mentor meeting was the orientation. This is our first official mentor workshop of the fall semester. Thank you all for being here. We're here to talk about a few different things. We're here to talk about 1, setting expectations. 2, helping your mentee with setting a vision. And 3, helping them find balance and reversing that and being open to answering these questions for yourself. Because as a student, they're balancing a lot of things like online classes or potentially in-person classes. But they're also balancing a lot of other life things going on, trying to get an internship in this crazy COVID world we're in. And you're balancing a lot of things too. You got work, you got family, you got potentially kids, you've got volunteer experiences, you got a lot of other things going on in your world too. These questions are not just meant for you to help your mentee, but also to allow your mentee to ask you questions. I was talking a little bit about this in the pre-chat, was just this idea that when we can teach other people something, it almost helps us learn and reiterate that more. I remember when I was a student, I oftentimes would tutor my friends, not because I, was just trying to be a good person, but because it actually helped me reiterate the information I needed to know for the upcoming exam. And I think this absolutely applies to our own personal habits and tactics. So when working with your mentee, let them teach you things. Let them give you guidance and advice, and ask them about things that you're vulnerable about or that you don't necessarily know the answers to, because for them, by teaching it, it almost can help them become more accountable, because they can start saying, oh, wow, am I being consistent with the person I'm putting out there, with the advice that I'm putting out there and the advice that I'm giving? This workshop should be about 10 to 15 minutes long. So it's going to be a quick period. And by the way, I'm so grateful that you all are here, that you're giving up your time to be a mentor and volunteer your time, but also that you're here to give it and gain this guidance as we go through these mentor workshops. The goal for these is just to be helpful, give you pointers, provide next steps, answer any questions you may have, and just overall be helpful to you as you build and grow your mentor bonds and relationships. So by now, you should have connected with your mentee. Dr. Jen, thanks for letting us know. We're going to be sure to follow up with you and your mentee to make sure that relationship gets kicked off. But if you have not started your mentor relationship with, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We can figure out your situation. Megan is awesome. She will handle all of your support needs as you work through this mentor relationship with your student. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about how to set proper expectations for your mentor relationship. Excuse me. The best way to handle any issues with your mentees, whether that be they didn't show up on time, if you felt like they didn't come as prepared as you'd like, maybe they had a noise in the background and it felt distracting, maybe they asked to reschedule on short notice, whatever it may be, we're going to talk about how we can set expectations and how we can handle any of those types of issues. And ultimately, we're going to also talk about how we can help students with key issues they face on a regular basis, like finding balance and identifying a vision, but also how you can apply that to your own life, because it goes both ways. The mentorship is supposed to be horizontal. So sure, you have more experience. You've been out of college for a while. That's fantastic. But the goal is that you can leverage this opportunity to learn from your mentee as well. I think that's so critical, is that it goes both ways. It's horizontal. It's mutually beneficial. So we talked about this before. We're going to bring it up every single workshop because I think it's so critical. And that is the 3 keys to success in a mentoring relationship. That is honing your strategy, honing your story, honing your state. They're so critical because we are not intentional about this. Every single time we come into our mentor relationship, we are not going to be on our best selves for when we're meeting with our mentee. It's just not going to happen. Are we intentional about what our physical state is, what the story we're telling ourselves is, and the strategies we're using and leveraging to help our mentee achieve the goals that they have set for themselves, as well as the goals that we've set for ourselves that we've shared with our mentees? So I said them in opposite order of importance. So ultimately, the most important component to your mentor relationships and just being successful as a mentor is your state. Physically, where are you? We're at the end of a crazy Thursday. We're almost into the weekend. I know you might be exhausted. You might be tired. You might have a lot of other things going on with your world, but I want to get you into a physical state conducive for being successful, for being ecstatic in your mentor relationship and just giving off positive vibes and energy. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to stand up, and for the next 30 seconds, I want you to shake it out. I want you to get loose. I want you to dance it out. I want you to let it go. I want you to shake out your legs, shake out your body, shake out your arms, shake out everything. And I want you to scream at the top of your lungs because I want you to get your vocal cords going. At the count of 3, scream at the top of your lungs. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out, let it loose, let it go. Pound your chest like as if you're King Kong. It feels great. It just feels great. I don't know. It feels great. It looks great. It might scare some people around you, but that's okay because ultimately it will get you into a state conducive for being successful. Your motions can change your emotions. You can change your physical feelings about your day, your life, anything going on by the way that you act, by the things that you do. It can change how you feel in a matter of seconds. So if you've all of a sudden done this application of just standing up, shaking it loose, letting it out, screaming at the top of your lungs, you are doing what you can to get yourself into a positive physical state. And I would imagine that if you have done this, if you have applied this, you already feel better. So just to interact with y'all, how many of you feel better? How many of you have actually applied this? How many of you feel better right now, no matter what, even if it is at the end of a long Thursday? How much do you feel better just by shaking it out, screaming at the top of your lungs and letting it loose? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. Karen, you feel great. That's awesome. Thanks for doing it. Very cool. I love it. I love it. And you might scare the people around you, and that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, how we look to somebody else in a given temporary moment in time is fleeting, but how we feel in a given moment and how we change the way that other people feel about us by the energy we give them can absolutely leave a lasting and memorable impact. So I really want to challenge you to, if you got an overcoming fear, if let's say you're in a public place, let it out, shake it loose, scream at the top of your lungs. I think in my experience, it's been awesome and it's always felt great. So the next key to being successful in your mentor relationship is honing your story. What is the story that you tell yourself? Why will you be successful as a mentor? Are you telling yourself a story about, hey, I've got not that much experience, or I don't know if I could possibly give advice to this person in this position in life, or I might not have the right answers to their questions? Or are you telling yourself, you know what? I may not know the answer to these questions, but I'm willing to ask questions so I can get a better understanding and help them work through their situations. What is the story you're telling yourself for why you will or will not be successful? That's so critical, because if we tell ourselves a negative story, we're going to have a negative outcome, plain and simple. We will only manifest the outcomes that we set for ourselves at the highest level and no higher. So we're not going to sit and think to ourselves, well, I'm going to, do my best to answer their questions, but I'm not going to necessarily ask any questions or dig deeper. And if I can't answer a question, so be it. We're not going to all of a sudden have our student come up with an epiphany from our advice that we're giving if we come in with that mentality. But if we come in the mentality of like, hey, I may not know the answers to your questions, but I'm more than happy and willing to ask you questions so that I can get a better understanding of what you're going through and potentially help you work through the situation that you're in. Because ultimately, I know you're only going to take actions that you think are realistic and feasible for yourself. And so ultimately, as a mentor within your mentoring relationship, if you're willing to ask those questions and tell yourself a story that you are a good question asker, that you are a good listener, and that you are willing to do what you can to help them achieve that goal, you're going to be much more likely to be successful because you're telling yourself a story for why you will and can be successful. The last key is your strategy. What are the strategies that you are leveraging to help your mentee get to where they're at? Is it helping them flesh out their LinkedIn profile, or connect with new people, or touch up their resume, or improve their cover letter, or connect with them with other people that you think might be able to help them as they pursue their career path and their career aspirations? There are multiple strategies you can leverage. It's not a one strategy fits all system. Not everybody needs the same thing at the same time. But what we recognize is that your ability to try new things, work with them on trying new things, you can then do so much more to help them get to where they like to be. That is strategy, that is story, that is state. Those are the 3 keys to being successful in your mentoring relationship. So let's move on to setting proper expectations. The first call with your mentee should be all about your mentee. I really want to challenge you on that. As your mentor, it's not about you sitting and giving a diatribe story about your life and what advice you have for them. It's really about listening. Learn what is going on with their world. Ask them questions. I'm a big fan of asking them to share with you their story, starting with kindergarten, and then what their dream job is and where they'd like to be in 5 years. So really the question that I strongly suggest for setting proper expectation is asking your mentee, tell me your life story starting with kindergarten. What is your dream job and where they'd like to be in 5 years? Ask them that. Don't have them necessarily ask you that, because ultimately don't make it about you, make it about them. Make it about how you can help them and get a better understanding of who they are and where they come from. Now, once you learn this information, ask them what they believe is one thing that they can work on between now and your next call that will help them get closer to accomplishing their goals. I don't know if y'all have ever read the book Atomic Habits, but it's a fantastic book. And one of the things it really talks about is this idea of setting small miniature habits every single day so that we can get a little bit closer to achieving our goal. What we find is that we are much more likely to achieve success and achieve goals that we've set for ourselves when we set small miniature bite-sized chunk goals that we can achieve every single day versus really big, arduous, attempts at trying to improve ourselves, but having it be random and happenstance. So for example, you'd be better off working out for 5 minutes every single day than having two really difficult 2.5 hour workouts, but randomly, sporadically over the course of a month, and not having any rhyme or reason or routine to why you're doing those exercises. And the reason for that is because consistency is how we get massive improvements over a long period of time. Now, remember what that thing is, and remember what that thing is in terms of what their goal is, and ask that student update on how or if they accomplish that task. Really help them break their big goal that they'd like to achieve before your next mentor meeting with your mentee into smaller bite-sized chunks, and to see if they've made some progress, because sometimes they may not have actually achieved the goal they set for themselves between your first call and your second call, but they may have achieved some steps towards achieving that. And that's still a win in itself, because if they set themselves a really big, hairy, arduous goal, that's okay if they didn't get all the way there. What's really most important is that they took steps. But if they took no steps and there's no way of measuring any miniature bite-sized chunks, it can be very demoralizing and difficult to really work towards actually accomplishing that goal. So I want to challenge you on that. So adjacent to setting proper expectation is handling issues. This could include if a student shows up late, if you felt that they didn't come prepared, if they had maybe noise in the background that was distracting, or if they asked to reschedule on short notice, or anything that could have frustrated you. This is the point that we can talk about setting expectations. So the first step is to not get mad at them and tell them what they did was wrong. That is the easiest way to lose the mentor relationship. Go through the first call like as if nothing happened, and take the time to listen to them and ask them questions. But by the end of the call, you say this: I really enjoyed this first call. Did you? They'll say yes. And then you say, I feel like I can offer you a lot as your mentor, but for future calls, there are some things that I would like from you. First, if we say that we're going to start our meeting at 10, then we start at 10. Can I count on you to be on time for our next meeting? Or if you say something like, when I say we're going to have a meeting and all of a sudden I hear music or people screaming in the background, I'm expecting that you're going to be able to be in a quiet place for when we're taking the time to meet with each other. Or if when we're scheduling meetings, I'm expecting that you come prepared with at least 5 questions for me. That's something that I'm expecting for our next mentor meeting. Can I count on you to do that? What that does, by waiting to set the expectation after building rapport, you are significantly more likely to have a strong relationship with the student than if you just get mad at them at the beginning of a conversation. So if you get mad at your student and you say, hey, you did something that I really didn't appreciate or that really frustrated me, if you tell them that at the very beginning, you've automatically turned them off. But if you wait to build rapport with them, if you wait to let them chat, if you really wait to hear them out, and then you set your expectations and say, hey, I'm really excited to continue this relationship as well, but here are my expectations, you can then start a dialogue about what your expectations are. Because keep in mind, for a lot of students, they have not fully had all the professional experiences yet. So for example, they may not have faced the pain of showing up late to an interview and saying, hey, we're not even going to consider you because you showed up 5 minutes late. And they think it was just 5 minutes. Like, what's the big deal? Well, they've never faced the pain potentially of getting rejected like that. So as a mentor, if you can help teach those lessons, if you can do that in a way that's respectful and part of rapport building, you're much more likely to salvage the relationship and build a really strong bond with the mentee that you are in a mentoring relationship with. Dr. John, I'm glad that you like that strategy of doing small bites versus one big bite. Does anybody have any questions right now? I'm just keeping track of the comment section. If y'all have any questions about anything, any comments about anything, please post them there. Looks like we don't have any now, but we're going to come back in the very end for some Q&A. The next part of this workshop, and this is some suggested questions, they're around vision and they're around balance. This is so critical to the mentor relationship because I want you to ask this question to your mentee, but I also want to encourage your mentee to ask you these questions. I want you to be open to being vulnerable and answering these questions. So we're going to talk about setting a vision first. So setting a vision is so critical for a student, especially right now during this coronavirus period, because there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or what if I'm not able to do this? Or what if I'm not able to do that? There's a lot of uncertainty about that. But if we can set a vision for ourselves, we can at least start setting ourselves on a path for success. So the first question is, if this situation were to work out in the best way possible, what would it be? And that could include your mentor relationship. It could include an internship that they're pursuing. It could include a full-time job that they're pursuing. It could mean any form of thing that they are working towards. If it were to work out in the best way possible, what would it be? What that does, why that question is so powerful, is because it gets them thinking about what is the end goal. Now, at the same time, if they ask you this question as the mentor, think about it from your mentor relationship. If this mentor relationship were to work out in the best way possible, what would that be for you? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn. Have that answer prepared for your student or your mentee when you're in your next conversation with them, because I think that's so critical. Because what's so important is for you to determine what success is, you have to have an idea of what that prize is. What is the best outcome for this? And how can you go about realistically getting there? The second question I like to ask is, what is one thing that seems impossible, but with a little luck and a lot of work, just might be within reach? The reason why that's such a powerful question is because it gets them thinking about these big, hairy, audacious goals. Ultimately, it can be easy to settle for smaller, minor goals that we know that we can accomplish because it gives us that little bit of dopamine rush to check off that box that we got this thing done. I know that I'm guilty of it. I'm sure that you all have been guilty of something like that before, where you might have set a smaller goal just because you like the idea of checking off that box. But I want to ask you, what is a big, hairy, audacious goal you have? What is something that seems impossible with a little luck and a lot of work just might be within reach for you in your own professional path? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. But this is a question that you can ask your student, and I think that can be really effective to getting an idea of how you can help push them and hold them accountable to where they would like to be in their life and career. The third question I like to ask is, what will you commit to doing today, this week, and this month? What is something you can commit to doing today, this week, and this month that will help you get to where you'd like to be, or help your mentee get to where they would like to be? That's where we start getting into that whole atomic habits, breaking things into smaller bite-sized chunks. So what is the big thing that they like to achieve that seems impossible, but what can they start doing by the end of this month to get them there, or by the end of this week, or by the end of this day? What can they do to start working on that path? And I'd love to ask you as the mentor, what is that for you? Post in the comment section. What is something you can commit to doing this month, this week, and today to get you started on being a better mentor, just started on achieving professional goals that you've set for yourself? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. The fourth question is, who do you know that thinks big? This is a great question to ask students because it helps them think beyond themselves. Because at the end of the day, we are all humans. We're all humans. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. Now, there are some people that we know that think big, and that's great. That's really inspiring. That is something that really helps get us going. By helping your student think about who thinks big, you're helping them align themselves with a paradigm, with a role model that they could follow to achieve similar successes, because we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. If we're spending time thinking about and setting our expectations of ourselves about people who are just average in our life, we're only going to achieve average results. But if we start setting our paradigm for success, our role models for people that are above us and are doing things that we think are really aspirational, that can really help us get to the point where we're really thinking big and is thinking that our big, hairy, audacious goals might actually be within reach. So I want to ask you that question, mentors. Who do you know that thinks big? Post in the comment section. And the last question I like to ask to help somebody achieve a vision is, what in your life keeps you thinking small? This is the contrary to the previous question. The reason why it's important is because it can allow you to start taking steps and start thinking about it. Who are the people that are holding me back from getting the things that I want in my life? Because sometimes we've got those friends that just bring us down. They're always negative. They're not choosing to support us. And maybe they've been friends with us for a long time. We think that because of the longevity of this relationship, we must keep it going. But if they're not supporting us in our vision for where we'd like to be, are they dead weight? Are they actually amplifying who we are? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. This might be a difficult question for you to answer for yourself as well, but I think it's so critical, because if we're going to ask this question to our mentee, we should think to ourselves, are there anybody in our life that keeps us thinking small and are not necessarily supporting us in our vision for where we'd like to be. And what is the most realistic way for us to potentially not necessarily filter them out of our life, but minimize our interaction with them so then we can surround ourselves with more people that support us? So I want to ask you that, how do you go about surrounding yourself with people that support you and avoiding those that potentially keep you thinking small? Post in the comment section. So that is all about how to achieve a vision. Next, we're going to talk about balance. But before we do that, I'll check out the comment section. Oh, Megan, you've made a comment for me to check out. Dr. Christine, why did you feel it was not helpful? So that's a great point that you brought up. So Dr. Christine, you mentioned, so Alex, so there's a couple questions brought up here. Alec, you brought up, what is Megan's email? It is support@ambition-in-motion.com. Dr. Christine Agard, you mentioned that you spoke with your mentee, but you're not sure if it was helpful. One thing that's really funny, I was just talking about this in the pre-session before this mentor workshop today. I was running a group mentor meeting with one of our corporate clients. So essentially, there's a company we're working with where we're pairing all of their employees together for mentorship across their company. It's really cool to see it happen. But one of the things that was brought up was this exact point that you brought up, was in the mentor relationship, one of the people at their company, actually a partner for the company, had mentioned that in his mentor relationship, he just felt like he was talking. He didn't know if the wisdom he was imparting or the questions he was asking was impactful. And it just felt more or less like a conversation. Unfortunately, his mentor, who was also in the room with us during this conversation, was there and was saying, well, Carlos, actually, one of the things that I learned was this story and this story. And it was extremely impactful for me because it's helped me not only in my personal relationship with my spouse, but also my professional relationship, because it helps me be a better person. And Carlos mentioned that he had no idea. He had no idea that the stories that he had shared or the questions that he had asked had such a big impact on his mentor and his mentor relationship, Alec. And so ultimately, the point I'm making is that sometimes you can be in a conversation with somebody you're in a mentoring relationship with, and you can think to yourself, well, am I being helpful? And the answer isn't that you're telling stories or you're sharing a bunch of wisdom. Sometimes it can be the questions you ask. And so often we're not necessarily acknowledged for the wisdom that we're giving that's the most sticky. So Dr. Christine, keep setting up your mentor conversations. And perhaps in your next mentor meeting, ask your mentee, what about our most recent conversation was most beneficial to you? What was most helpful? Now, they might be introverted. They might not necessarily be as comfortable being vulnerable. They might be a little bashful. And they might not necessarily share all of it with you. But keep in mind, we know just from the data how impactful your presence in their life is to them. So keep meeting. And ideally, they feel comfortable with you and more vulnerable with you over the course of your mentor relationship, where they can say, you know what, Dr. Christine, this part of our conversation was so helpful to me. You don't know this, but this is something that I'm going through. And by learning your story, it really helped empower me to achieve XYZ outcome. So the point I'm making is keep pushing through. Recognize that it might not necessarily be as clear about what tips, tricks, or questions you asked that really were powerful to your mentee, but we know that they are because the data supports it. So Dr. Christine, you mentioned, I think he wants me to tell him what to do with his life. I can tell you that's probably not the case. I know that some students have questions about what their next steps may be, but oftentimes it's the questions we ask that help us get a clear idea of what they want. So just those questions that I just suggested about how to set a vision, I think those would be fantastic questions to ask your mentee in your next conversation, so you can get an idea of where he would like to go in his life and his career, and how you can be his Sherpa up that mountain of his life and his career path. So just to reiterate, those questions for finding vision is, the first one is, if the situation were to work out for you in the best way possible, what would it be? The second was, what is one thing that seems impossible, but with a little luck and a lot of work just might be within reach? The third is, what will you commit to today, this week, and this month? The fourth is, who do you know that thinks big? And the fifth question is, what in your life keeps you thinking small? That is absolutely something I'd highly suggest that you ask your mentee in your next conversation, Dr. Christine, so then you can help your mentee identify their vision. So William, you said the best possible outcome for me would be to provide some level of guidance that allows your mentee to see what they can achieve big things. I love that. I think, at the end of the day, mentors see something in us that we may not necessarily see in ourselves. And I think that's a really great point you bring up, William. Annie, I like to encourage my mentee to not let things control them where they can't function. Life's one day at a time. I think that's such great advice, Annie. Travis, what holds me in the habit of thinking small is fear. I think that's real. But Travis, keep in mind, fear is the thing that holds us back from getting what we want in this life, plain and simple. Most fear is BS we create in our minds that hold us back from getting what we want in our life. By acknowledging what our own fear is, we can start setting ourselves on a path towards actually accomplishing it. Now, fear is not to say that it doesn't actually exist. It absolutely does. If it didn't exist, it wouldn't hold us back from getting what we want. Now, there's a fine line between fear and vulnerability. I think vulnerability can help play into that. So what our fears are, by being able to share what our fears are with our mentee or with the people that we really support and trust and build deep bonds with, we can actually start to overcome that because we can start to acknowledge, hey, this is a fear that I hold. And by putting it out there into the ether, into the world, we can actually start to recognize, you know what, that shouldn't be holding me back because I recognize this isn't necessarily the thing that is holding me back. It's this other thing. And so ultimately what I'm trying to say is, Travis, put your fear out there, be vulnerable. And once you do, it's going to be so much easier to overcome those fears. Karen, you want to help your mentee understand reality. I think that's a good point. I think accountability is critical. I think reality is critical, but don't stifle their innovation. Don't stifle their dreams and goals. I think there's that fine line of what is helping them achieve reality, giving them that realistic dose of what to expect, because we don't want to set them up for failure. But at that same time, never stifle their dreams. Nothing new was ever created because there was a path that led them to it in the first place. Most new things were created, whether that be, I'm looking back at the Bill Gates example. When we look at the first personal computers, well, obviously before Steve Jobs, but even the software for them, like what Bill Gates created with Microsoft Word and Excel, that didn't exist prior in the way that it is used currently today. And so Bill Gates was truly an innovator. Not to say that, everybody's going to be an innovator for something that's world changing, but for your student and their career and what they're trying to accomplish, challenge them and encourage them to achieve their dreams. But the reality component comes in when it comes to setting those miniature goals. You can't expect to have the amazing, incredible outcome that you like without actually setting the small bite-sized chunk goals that get you to there in the first place. Carolyn, French, I received an email from my mentee that has been giving me difficult time scheduling time conference with me. But okay, just keep following up with your mentee, Carolyn, and you'll figure out a time that works. So let's talk about this next step. And it's called balance. By the way, I apologize, this has gone a little bit longer than normal, but I think we've had some really good interaction in the comment section, which has allowed us to speak for a little bit longer, which I'm grateful for y'all being here. But there are 7 core questions that I love to ask when it comes to achieving balance within your mentor relationship and helping your mentee work towards that. But I also want to challenge you to answer these questions as well. So the first question in terms of helping your mentee achieve balance is, and by the way, Carolyn, I think this is really relevant to you. If you're mentioning that your mentee is struggling to find time, let's help them find balance. So the first question is, what do you want to say yes in your life? By the way, you should ask this for yourself. If you ever feel like you're feeling off kilter, or that you're always time constrained, or that you're busy, ask yourself this. What do you want to say yes to in your life? Post in the comment section. The second question is, what do you need to say no to? This is a great question to ask because it can help them prioritize what they're saying yes to, what they're saying no to, and what they need to say no to. So often it can be easy to be yes people, where we just say yes to everything and we want to be people pleasers. That's such a normal habit. That's such a normal thing to feel. But in reality, we only have a finite amount of time in the day, and it's up to us to prioritize that. So then we're spending our time doing the things that serve us, not the things that take from us. So what do we need to say no to? And as mentors, this can include in your life too. If you're feeling busy, if you're feeling like things are pulling you away from who you are, what do you need to say no to? Post in the comment section. The third question I like to ask is, when do you feel pulled off center? So this is a great question to ask because it can allow your mentee to really acknowledge and dive deeper into, when do I feel stressed out? Is it because of exams? Is it because of family? Is it because of internships? Is it because of anything going on in my world? What is pulling me off center? What is pulling me off of who I am? The fourth question I like to ask is, what contributes to this feeling? So is it stress? Is it the feeling of being a people pleaser? I mean, really targeting what that specific thing is that's pulling us off center is so critical to being able to realize what that is, target it, and be able to eradicate it, or at least minimize it so that we can get more balanced. The fifth question I like to ask is, when do you feel most grounded in life? This is a great question to ask because it can allow you to identify the opposite perspective of that relationship, especially with your mentee. So when they feel like they're in flow, when they feel like I'm connected, when they feel like I can breathe again, when is that feeling for them? Really get to know what that is, because they can give you a goal to work towards, at least your mentee to work towards in life and in their career and in their pursuit of their professional path. The sixth question I like to ask is, what in your life takes away from what might be possible for you? Similar to vision, who are the things that are keeping us thinking small? What are taking away from us achieving the goals that we've set for ourselves? These are our fears. These are our things that we are frustrated by. This is really great to target and identify, because then it can help us to start identify strategies to help us overcome those things that might take away from us being successful. And then the last question I like to ask is, when your life adds to who you are. When your life adds to who you are and helps you amplify your own life and your own career path and your own professional trajectory and perspective. It's a great question to ask, because it allows them to identify and focus on the things that are helping amplify who they are and where they like to be. You can answer that for yourself. I think these are great questions for you to answer with your mentee in your mentor conversations. So to reiterate the balance questions, they are: 1, what do you want to say yes to in your life? 2, what do you need to say no to? 3, when do you feel pulled off center? 4, what contributes to this feeling? 5, when do you feel most grounded in life? 6, when your life takes away from what might be possible for you? And 7, when your life adds to who you are. Those are the questions that I love to ask to help someone gain balance, because ultimately it can help us get an idea of where they're at and how they can really reiterate and get back onto where they like to be and be able to manage their time and just overall breathe and feel like they're connected to what they're trying to accomplish and that they're not spending their time wasted. So anyways, let's answer some questions. This has been a fantastic workshop. I'm so grateful for your participation and how active y'all have been in the comment section. I feel like I'm learning a ton from your perspective. I'm loving the questions that you're asking. It's really, Dr. Jen, yes to myself, helping bring harmony and leadership to communication. I think that's awesome. Karen, saying yes more often to new ideas and activities instead of automatically saying no. That's great. That's the other side of it. Sometimes some people say yes to too many things. Sometimes some people say no to too many things, but don't feel too hard on yourself, Karen. I mean, the mere fact that you have volunteered yourself to be a mentor in this program shows that you're saying yes to some things, and it's an incredible thing that you're doing right now. So don't be too hard on yourself. Carolyn, yes to developing a data visualization course for high schoolers. No to people who operate in urgent modes. I think that's a good point. I think there's a lot of research from Dr. Newport where he talks about this component of mental residue. When we switch tasks and we change tasks from doing multiple things all the time, i.e. when people come to us and say, hey, this is an urgent thing we need to do. This is an urgent thing we need to do. When we're constantly switching tasks, what it does is it creates mental residue, and it diminishes our ability to do other things and accomplish other tasks. And so I think it's a great point that you bring up of just not doing too many urgent things. Dr. Jen, ground through nature and meditation. I think it's great. Carolyn, planning a virtual wedding event and got married last week. Congratulations. That's awesome. William, I've learned to say no to some people to set boundaries. I think that's a smart idea. I mean, ultimately, we got to set that in our life, and I'm glad that you're acknowledging this for yourself. I definitely think helping your mentee in this relationship work through that is so critical as well. Annie, it's important to understand the only failure is when you don't try. I think you're so right on that. You don't know if you can succeed if you don't try. Second, there's no such thing as stress. It's dessert spelled backwards. I love that. I think I saw that quote at a coffee shop recently. I think it's a very silly saying, but I think it's funny and it's a good way of putting it. I think one thing that Tony Robbins loves to say, and I'm a big believer in it, is that there's no such thing as a lack of resources. It's just a lack of resourcefulness. We can blame anybody or anything for why we're not achieving the goals we have in our life, but ultimately it is our own inability to not be resourceful enough to try new things, try new strategies to help us get to where we like to be. That is what is not allowing us to achieve those goals. Setting expectations with your student, with your mentee, but also setting a vision and finding balance, helping them find balance with their life. I mean, there's so much going on in our world right now, so many things going on that we're having to balance. And I would imagine that you're facing similar situations too. It might even be beneficial to have your mentee also ask you these exact same questions, because with work, being a mentor, family, all the things you've got going on, it might be beneficial because as the mentor in this relationship, you're supposed to be giving guidance to them, but also letting them teach you as well. I know that for me, when I'm teaching, I'm learning just by focusing on content and information that is beneficial to somebody else. Sometimes I realize there are things that I know I should do, but I've almost like lost touch with my application of those activities because for whatever reason, I just stopped doing it. I know it's the right thing to do, but I stopped. So the point I'm making is that when you're in a mentoring relationship with a student, it can be beneficial to let them teach you and to have them ask you questions and more or less be vulnerable and open up to them. Well, everybody, thank y'all for being here. This has been a wonderful workshop this evening. I'm so grateful for you all being volunteers as mentors, during this fall semester. I hope you've taken and learned something from this workshop. I'm excited to see how you apply it in your mentor relationship. If you got any questions about your mentor relationship whatsoever, email support@ambitioninmotion.com. Also, if you're a mentor and you work in a company and you think to yourself, man, I would love to have this type of mentor program in my company. How do I do this? Reach out to support@ambitioninmotion.com. We'd love to chat with you about how this might work at your company, because mentorship can apply not only to students and alumni, but also in your corporate relationships, because we recognize we're going to spend the majority of our waking hours working. We might as well be doing it with people we have oxytocin with, and mentorship is a great way to accomplish that. But everybody, thank y'all for being here. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. This has been a wonderful lunch and learn, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at our next workshop. Have a good night, everybody.